Alright viewers, today we have a special treat. Today it's the RF-01 Pro 320 gram. This video is sponsored by me and the TennCom store. We're now shipping Solinco and grapple snake strings to Canadians. Any purchase you make from the TennCom store will go directly into supporting the creation of future videos just like this. The new RF-01 Pro is a complete departure from any Federer based racket that we've seen in the past. Gone are these PWS little bumps at the 3 and 9 o'clock. Gone is the flat beam. Gone is the box beam. Now we have a variable tapered beam. It's thickest, I think, in the throat, as thick as 24 millimeters, kind of in this lower shoulder area. It's an elliptical beam shape. It reminds me a lot of like the Shift or the Arrow. Not the throat of the Arrow, but the actual hoop of the Arrow. So it cuts through the air super fast, super cleanly. It's a 16 by 19 string pattern. I tried the Pro model, which is a 320 gram frame with a 31.5 centimeter balance point. I believe the swing weight was 325 strung, and I tested it with Alu Power Silver at 53 pounds. So how does the RF-01 Pro play? Well, it's pretty special. Let's talk about feel first. So it sounds like this hoop is foam filled. You get a very solid hitting feel through the frame. It's also very plush. It's very soft in the sweet spot, but it doesn't feel fake in any way. I've criticized a lot of auxetic frames for feeling a little bit fake, a little bit artificial. Same with Wilson frames like the Clash or the Shift. They feel like they have so much extra going on, and it doesn't feel organic or natural to what we'd expect from your typical tennis racket. This new RF-01 Pro feels natural. It feels organic. It feels like a piece of graphite should. It feels like a tennis racket. It feels like a player's racket. And that's something that I think was absolutely necessary for Wilson to nail the release of this frame, and they've done it really well. The feel is a lot softer than any other Prostaff I've tried. I tried the V14 right side by side with it. 97, just to check. I also hit my Regna because I was curious. To me, the Regna is one of the best feeling rackets in my tennis collection, so I thought I'd see how it stacked up. I like this better, I think. And the RF-01 Pro is a little bit more muted. Not quite as much vibration as the Prostaff 97 or the Regna. It's not as direct feeling, but I think they needed that because they're trying to make this racket accessible to a wide range of players, and players' tastes right now are very much preferring that softer, that plusher feel, because there's so many concerns with the elbow thing and injuries given polyester strings and all that stuff. I do, and this is a separate discussion, think those concerns are a bit outdated, and I hope we move forward with them, but I don't think the RF-01 Pro has leaned in too heavily to cater to those players. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, sometimes the speeds feel like they were artificially softened, like softer than they really should have been. Same with the gravities. I think the gravities feel a lot less connected and a lot more noodly than the RF-01 Pro. So I really think Wilson has done a nice job striking the correct balance between stiffness for performance and direct feel and responsiveness compared to making things comfortable and accessible for everybody. I really doubted it too. The other thing you're probably wondering is, how does that 320 grams play? Because that is so much lighter than previous RF signature rackets, and it feels a lot lighter. I also hit the RF97 that day, and I've hit it a couple weeks ago on grass courts actually. And the RF97 also feels way stiffer. It feels way, way heavier, more than 20 grams. There's so much more weight in the head of the RF97, whereas this new RF-01 Pro feels so fast and maneuverable and whippy and headlight. It feels a lot more like the swing feel is like this. It's like, this is a 6195. It's an old school racket. Federer used the 90 before that. And one of the things that people love about these smaller head size that we've lost now that 97 is pretty much the smallest head size we're getting is this precision through the swing. It feels so light and whippy. I don't know if that's actually because the head size is smaller, if it just had to do with the weight distribution of older frames, But this new RF-01 Pro has that same kind of lightness in the head. But the best part is most rackets now that have lightness in the head, like I think the V9 blades have a lot of lightness in the head, but they don't have really great stability. And there's something so solid feeling about this RF-01 Pro that you don't feel like that lightness in the head is going to cost you that much. And I think that's one of the reasons they had to go with this elliptical beam shape. The box beams are just not as efficient when it comes to maximizing power and stability. Now, speaking of power and stability, even though I am really happy with the stability levels of this frame, I wouldn't say it's especially stable. It feels like the twist weight is really low, meaning there's not a ton of weight at the 3 and 9 o'clock locations. And I think that's one of the big reasons that it feels so fast through the air. It just cuts through the air like a hot knife through butter. It's so whippy feeling, it's so easy to get all this racket head speed at that higher weight. And I think because they've taken weight out of these 3 and 9 o'clock locations, which is actually a really common place to put a lot of weight in modern frames for that stability, like the Aero 98 has a huge twist weight, and that's why it's one of the most stable feeling rackets on the market. The RF97 doesn't have that. It doesn't have this expansive sweet spot that feels like it's edge to edge. It has a defined sweet spot, and I personally like that. That's what I want from a player's racket. From a player's racket, I'm expecting the racket to be a little bit picky and force me to really do what I need to do to hit the best ball possible. And the best ball possible is going to be struck in the center of the string bed. And a lot of modern rackets are letting you get away with a little bit worse contact point, but this RF-01 Pro, you still have to center it. But the thing about the centering of the ball with this RF-01 Pro is there's so much power. The power level on center, especially for a 325 swing weight racket, is up there with the Pure Strike that I have behind me, which is a 340 swing weight. There is so much power on center, and that feels so Fed-like, which is, I think, another thing that they really hit the nail on the head. This RF-01 Pro feels Fed-like. And Fed has insane power when he hits the ball in the center of the strings. It's just when he's on the back foot against guys who are really hurting him that he doesn't have that natural, effortless power. And that's kind of the feeling that you get with this RF-01 Pro. You hit it in the middle, you get your weight shifting forward, and it's probably one of the most rewarding experiences when it comes to these modern players' frames. And it's still like infinitely more forgiving than the Prostaff 97. Even though you could argue it feels more forgiving than the Prostaff X, even though that's 100 square inch frame. I hit it basically back to back also with the new Extreme Pro. It feels more forgiving, more powerful, but also more precise than the Extreme Pro. I think Wilson has done a really good job of balancing the trade-offs when it comes to designing this frame to make this RF-01 Pro feel like an homage to Federer, but something Federer would use if he was 30 years old today. And apparently that is the marketing story. They were supposedly designing this frame in case Federer didn't retire at that last match at Wimbledon. I don't know how true that is. I have a hard time buying it personally, but I still can imagine him using this. I can imagine Dimitrov using this. I can imagine Tsitsipas using this. I actually would like to see Tsitsipas dump that blade and go for something a little more powerful, a little more forgiving to help him against those guys who really hurt him, like Sinner, like Alcaraz. They hurt him with pace. Going to something like the RF-01 Pro, so much more power on center, a little bit more help off center compared to that blade. I think that would be a really good choice. Now, all that said, I do have some concerns for Wilson's lineup on the whole. I don't see how this doesn't cannibalize all of the blade's sales. Now suddenly Wilson has two attack-oriented 98 square inch frames, and I think the RF-01 Pro is just better across the board. It swings nicer, it feels better, has more power on center, has more forgiveness off center. The spin is way higher. The spin isn't insane, but it's very solid for a 98. I think it's better than the E-Zone. I think it's better than the Extreme. Not quite up there with like the V-Core 98, but it's not supposed to be a spin racket. Spin is just a byproduct of how much racket head speed you can access because of the insane maneuverability for the weight. The other thing is I like this so much on my two-handed backhand, which was insane. Luca also liked it on his two-handed backhand, so I don't think it was even just me. It just happens to also be a really good two-handed backhand racket, or maybe that's just because my technique on my two-hander is cleaner than on my forehand. The only situation where you feel like there might be a hint of like tech in this frame, because the whole thing does feel very organic and natural despite being foam filled and a bit dampened, is there's a bit of shifty lateral flex, and it's only on slices, which I find really interesting. When I was going to loop up my forehand with the shift, you really feel like the down and up kind of flex on those loopy forehands. Didn't feel that with the RF-01 Pro, and I'm glad, because I don't like this feeling. But you do feel it on the slices, which is sick because it makes slices better, at least for me. I felt like I was slicing like a god with this thing, and my backhand slice sucks. Now, when it comes to my personal feelings about how this works for my game, it's not something that I would consider switching to at all. Something I would consider switching to last year, 100%. I think this would have been like an easy switch for me. It ticks a lot of my boxes, but I think now I'm finding so much more control within myself, within my own game, that I'm liking these big power 100s. It would be interesting to see this kind of philosophy packaged into a 100. I don't know what the rest of the RF lineup is going to be. I've heard there's supposed to be 3 rackets. I'm pretty sure there's going to be one at 300 grams, still going to have that lower balance point, still going to be a 98. What if this lighter one comes in, say it's at 280 grams? If that's a 100 with similar design philosophy, that could be one of the greatest platform rackets of all time. Already, I think this is probably going to be one of the most important rackets of the year. I think it's probably going to sell well. I think the paint job is hideous. But it's so neutral, I don't think it's going to impact sales. We've seen when manufacturers like Bablat take risks with Pure Aero Rafa, they don't really pay off. So I think we'll be seeing this in the hands of almost everyone, because for the first time ever, we have a Roger Federer branded tennis racket that literally anybody can use, and who doesn't want that? Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.